I'm wondering, how can we be sure that the gospel story about Jesus' death and resurrection is true? How can we know that it's reliable?
If I was not a Christian, I would love for Christianity just to be written like a fairy story, and then that way I could just write it off as being completely rubbish, having no more credibility than a Mother Goose story or like, a Harry Potter story. The problem is, if I'm not a Christian, is that Christianity and the New Testament Gospels and the whole Bible are just so interwoven into credible human history that I've got a problem. So the stories of Jesus not only just talk about him, but also talk about people like Pontius Pilate and talk about places like Galilee and Nazareth and Jerusalem that are real historical places. And the other thing is that there's so many eyewitnesses to the events, so it would be a little bit different. For example, the religion of Islam has one man, Muhammad, who apparently had a vision of God and wrote it down in one book. So it's one man, one author. Nobody else was there. It's his subjective experience. But Jesus' life, death, and resurrection was seen by many different eyewitnesses. Many different authors wrote down what he did. And many of them were alive at the time the New Testament was written, so people could corroborate and say, hey, this did happen, this didn't happen, I was there, so I would know. And I guess ultimately it hangs on whether or not Jesus rose again from the dead, because that's a claim that the early Christians made, that the Bible makes unashamedly, that the Jesus who was crucified under Pontius Pilate, 3 days later his tomb was empty.